modern dating apps discovered something extremely profitable about human psychology. Lonely people often stay online longer than happy people. They swipe more. They check notifications more often. They come back after midnight. They reopen conversations that already died 3 times. They buy premium features, hoping the algorithm will finally show them someone better. And over time, some of the most successful apps on Earth quietly built entire business models around that emotional loop. At first, but something else happened too. The deeper dating apps integrated themselves into modern life, the more users started reporting a strange contradiction. They had more access to people than any generation in history. More conversations, more photos, more matches, more options. And yet many users increasingly described modern dating with words like exhausting, addictive, disposable, emotionally confusing, performative, even lonely. By the early 2020s, videos about dating app burnout flooded TikTok and YouTube. Reddit threads filled with frustration about ghosting, endless swiping, shallow conversations, disappearing matches, emotional fatigue, and the strange feeling that human relationships were starting to behave more like content feeds than real emotional experiences. And behind all of it sat one uncomfortable question. What if the apps designed to solve loneliness were also helping create it? Because the story of Tinder, Match Group, Bumble, Hinge, and modern dating platforms is not really about romance. It's about algorithms, behavioral psychology, attention economics, social isolation, smartphone culture, and one of the biggest transformations in modern human behavior. The moment intimacy itself became part of the internet economy. To understand why dating apps became so powerful, you have to go back to a very different internet. During the late 1990s, online dating still sounded strange to most people, a little awkward, a little desperate, sometimes even dangerous. The internet itself still felt unstable back then. Most people used desktop computers instead of smartphones. Social media barely existed. Meeting strangers online carried a completely different emotional meaning because online life itself still felt separated from real life. In many countries, couples still mostly met through school, work, religious communities, mutual friends, bars, parties, or random physical environments repeated over time. Geography heavily shaped relationships. Your social world had limits, your town had limits, your friend group had limits. Early dating websites reflected that older culture. Match.com launched in 1995 and became one of the first major online dating platforms to reach mainstream audiences. But the experience looked nothing like modern dating apps. Users filled out long profiles. Some wrote detailed descriptions about hobbies, values, future goals, religion, and emotional compatibility. eHarmony went even further. The company treated matchmaking almost like psychological engineering. Users answered massive questionnaires, sometimes containing hundreds of questions. The platform tried to predict long-term compatibility using behavioral data and personality matching systems. And honestly, this made sense historically. The internet still felt slower and more intentional during the early 2000s. People approached online dating cautiously because digital identity itself was still developing socially. Facebook didn't dominate human interaction yet. Instagram didn't exist yet. Smartphones hadn't fully fused the internet into everyday life yet. But underneath those early dating platforms, something important was already starting to change psychologically. The internet was altering how humans experience choice itself. In normal offline life, social environments naturally create boundaries around relationships. You meet people repeatedly over time. Familiarity grows slowly. Communities overlap. Social consequences exist. But online platforms weakened those boundaries dramatically. Suddenly, users could browse hundreds of profiles quickly from home. And at first, this felt exciting. More options sounded empowering. Why settle for one social circle when the internet could potentially connect you with thousands of people instead? But psychologists later started observing something strange. Humans often become less satisfied when choices become endless. Barry Schwartz later popularized this idea through the paradox of choice. Too many options can increase anxiety rather than freedom because people constantly imagine better alternatives existing somewhere else. And dating apps would eventually industrialize that psychological tendency at global scale. Then smartphones changed everything. This part matters enormously because dating apps didn't become culturally dominant simply because they existed online. They became dominant because smartphones transformed human attention itself. Before smartphones, online dating usually required intentional effort. You sat down at a computer, logged into a website, read profiles carefully, sent messages deliberately. But once smartphones became extensions of human consciousness, dating behavior changed completely. The apps stopped being destinations users occasionally visited. They became portable, emotional environments people carried everywhere. And timing mattered almost perfectly. During the late 2000s and early 2010s, social media companies were already training billions of people to interact through notifications, infinite feeds, likes, and algorithmic validation systems. Facebook normalized online identity performance. Instagram transformed self-image into a constant visual competition. Twitter accelerated emotional reactions into rapid-fire public conversation. Human attention increasingly moved inside platforms optimized around engagement. Dating apps arrived directly in the middle of that transformation. Then Tinder appeared in 2012 and changed online dating permanently. Tinder felt radically different from older dating platforms almost immediately. It stripped away most of the slow emotional structure surrounding traditional online dating. Long compatibility tests disappeared. Detailed profiles became secondary. Personality descriptions shrank dramatically. The app focused almost entirely on one action: swiping. One face, 1 second, swipe left, swipe right. Decision made instantly. And this design choice turned out to be one of the most psychologically effective interface systems ever created for smartphones. Swiping felt smooth, frictionless, fast, slightly playful. Users could evaluate dozens of people within minutes without emotional investment. Rejection carried almost no cost because another profile instantly replaced the previous one. But Tinder also introduced something much more powerful psychologically: intermittent rewards. Users never knew when the next match would appear. Most swipes produced nothing. Then suddenly, match, notification, dopamine spike, excitement. Maybe this person likes me. Maybe this conversation goes somewhere. Maybe this changes my life. Casinos use similar reward systems inside slot machines because unpredictable rewards create extremely strong behavioral reinforcement loops. Social media platforms later used comparable mechanics with likes, notifications, and algorithmic engagement systems. Tinder applied that same logic directly to attraction and validation. Former Tinder executives later openly discussed how important engagement metrics became internally. The company measured nearly everything: swipe behavior, messaging frequency, return patterns, notification response rates, user retention, time spent inside the app. Engineers constantly tested interface changes recommendation systems, ranking structures, and engagement loops. Tinder wasn't simply helping people date anymore. It was becoming a large-scale behavioral laboratory studying attraction, validation, and human attention in real time. And the growth became enormous. Tinder spread through college campuses first because it perfectly matched emerging smartphone culture. It felt casual instead of emotionally serious, fast instead of awkward, playful instead of vulnerable. Older dating sites often sounded like digital marriage services. Tinder felt more like social entertainment. That distinction mattered enormously for younger users growing up inside internet culture already shaped by instant interaction. By the mid-2010s, Tinder users were swiping billions of times per day globally. Millions of people developed unconscious habits around checking the app repeatedly throughout the day, during work breaks, while watching television, sitting on trains, waiting in grocery store lines, lying awake at 2 a.m., feeling lonely after another failed conversation. Dating apps increasingly behaved less like matchmaking systems and more like emotional infrastructure embedded directly into daily life. But behind the scenes, another transformation was happening quietly. The apps were collecting extraordinary amounts of behavioral data. Every swipe became information. Every hesitation became information. Every message length, response delay, emoji, profile view, match rate, and conversation outcome became measurable behavioral signals. The platforms learned what kinds of photos attracted attention fastest, which bios increased engagement, which users stayed active longest, which conversations led to meetings, which profiles users paused on without swiping immediately. Dating apps were no longer just social platforms. They were recommendation systems studying human desire scientifically at massive scale. And eventually, the algorithms started shaping behavior back. One of the most misunderstood parts of modern dating apps is this: users are not seeing random people. Modern dating platforms became sophisticated ranking systems optimized around engagement prediction. Tinder reportedly used systems publicly compared to ELO ratings from competitive chess for years. The exact details evolved over time, and companies rarely revealed full mechanics publicly, but the basic idea became increasingly clear. The app's estimated desirability, engagement potential, activity levels, and likely interaction outcomes constantly behind the scenes. Highly active users behave differently from occasional users. Profiles receiving heavy engagement were treated differently from invisible profiles. Users who purchased premium features often gained additional visibility. Recommendation systems adjusted continuously. And this changed how people experienced attraction psychologically. Suddenly, desirability itself started feeling algorithmic. Many users began optimizing profiles, almost like marketers optimizing advertisements. Better lighting, better angles, strategic bios, carefully selected humor. Photos designed specifically for engagement performance. Some people tested profile changes repeatedly, like social media influencers tracking analytics. Attraction increasingly merged with digital branding. Instagram accelerated this trend dramatically. By the late 2000s, dating apps and social media platforms had started blending together psychologically. Users linked Instagram accounts directly into dating profiles. Followers became social proof. Lifestyle performance became part of attraction. Online visibility itself started carrying romantic value. The internet was quietly turning identity into something partially optimized for algorithms. And meanwhile, loneliness itself was changing historically. This part is important because dating apps didn't become dominant in isolation. They exploded during a broader social transformation happening across modern life. Young adults moved cities more frequently for work. Housing became more expensive. Marriage happened later. More people lived alone. Traditional community structures weakened in many places. Remote work increased isolation for some people. Social media replaced physical interaction with digital interaction for hours every day. Smartphones absorbed enormous amounts of attention that once belonged to public spaces, face-to-face interaction, boredom, or spontaneous social encounters. The average person suddenly had hundreds of online interactions, but often fewer stable real-world communities. Dating apps entered directly into that emotional vacuum. And financially, the business became extremely lucrative. Match Group gradually acquired enormous sections of the online dating industry, including Tinder, Hinge, OkCupid, Match.com, and plenty of fish. Many users never realized how much of the global online dating ecosystem eventually became concentrated under one corporate structure. Different apps targeted different emotional identities. Tinder focused on speed, attraction, and large-scale engagement. Hinge branded itself as designed to be deleted, targeting users seeking more serious relationships. Bumble positioned itself around women initiating conversations first. But underneath the branding differences, most platforms still operated inside the same broader attention economy logic. Engagement mattered enormously because engagement drove subscriptions, premium upgrades, advertising potential, investor growth expectations, and long-term platform retention. And this created one of the strangest contradictions inside the dating app industry. Publicly, the apps promised connection. But from a business perspective, users who leave permanently after finding successful relationships stop generating engagement and subscription revenue. The ideal user, from a platform perspective, is often emotionally engaged but still searching, hopeful enough to keep swiping, frustrated enough to keep returning, curious enough to reopen the app tomorrow night. Then monetization expanded aggressively. Tinder Plus, Tinder Gold, boosts, super likes, read receipts, priority visibility. Suddenly, users could pay for increased exposure inside the algorithmic marketplace of attention. Loneliness itself became monetizable at enormous scale. But it wasn't just loneliness traditionally understood. The platforms monetized insecurity, curiosity, validation seeking, fear of missing out, romantic uncertainty, boredom, social comparison. Humans naturally crave emotional connection and social approval. Dating apps transformed those emotional needs into recurring engagement systems operating continuously through smartphones. And eventually, researchers started noticing troubling patterns. Many users reported emotional exhaustion from endless swiping without meaningful connection. Others described becoming addicted to matching itself rather than actual relationships. Some users developed habits around checking apps for validation, even when they had no intention of meeting anyone. Psychologists studying dating apps observed how intermittent rewards, uncertainty, and social comparison could intensify compulsive behavior patterns. And socially, the apps produced entirely new forms of emotional instability at scale. Ghosting became normalized. Breadcrumbing became normalized. Situationships became normalized. Orbiting became normalized. Entire vocabularies emerged to describe unstable internet relationship behavior because humans had never experienced algorithmically mediated dating environments at this scale before. Many users described modern dating as emotionally disposable. Conversations disappeared suddenly. Matches vanished without explanation. Endless alternatives created. Strange psychological incentives. Why commit emotionally when another potentially better option might appear after 3 more swipes? This doesn't mean dating apps destroyed love. Reality is more complicated than that. Millions of successful relationships genuinely formed through these platforms. For LGBTQ users especially, dating apps often created life-changing access to connection and community in environments where physical dating opportunities historically remained limited or unsafe. Geographic barriers weakened dramatically. International relationships became easier. Social opportunities expanded enormously for many people. The technology itself wasn't inherently evil, but the incentives behind the technology mattered, and internet platforms generally optimize around engagement, because engagement drives growth. This created subtle but powerful tensions between emotional well-being and platform economics. Some internal company strategies reflected this tension directly. Product teams constantly tested how notification timing affected user return behavior. How quickly should users receive matches? How many profiles should be visible daily? What creates enough excitement without overwhelming users? What keeps conversations active longer? Behind the scenes, engineers analyzed human romantic behavior almost like scientists studying laboratory reactions. And the apps kept becoming smarter. Machine learning systems improved recommendations. Behavioral prediction improved. Recommendation engines became more sophisticated. Artificial intelligence increasingly shaped visibility, matching, ranking, and interaction outcomes. Dating platforms evolved into hybrids between social networks, entertainment systems, subscription businesses, and behavioral prediction engines. Then the pandemic intensified everything. During lockdowns, physical social interaction collapsed almost overnight across huge parts of the world. Loneliness surged. Dating app usage increased dramatically. Video dating features expanded quickly. But the pandemic also exposed something important psychologically. Human beings still needed physical presence in ways digital interaction couldn't fully replace. Endless texting without real-world grounding created emotional fatigue for many users. After lockdowns ended, another trend became impossible to ignore online. Massive numbers of younger users openly discussed dating app burnout. TikTok filled with videos about emotional exhaustion, repetitive conversations, disappearing interest, and the strange feeling that dating itself was beginning to feel algorithmic rather than human. Some users repeatedly deleted the apps, then returned. Weeks later, because modern social life increasingly revolved around them anyway. In many cities, dating apps effectively became normalized social infrastructure rather than optional technology. And meanwhile, something even stranger started emerging. Artificial intelligence entered the ecosystem too. AI-generated profile photos appeared online. Bots increased. Recommendation systems became more predictive. Some platforms experimented with AI-assisted matching tools and conversation systems. At the same time, entirely separate AI companion apps started attracting millions of users globally. Replica, Character.ai, and similar platforms revealed something emotionally complicated about modern loneliness. Some people formed genuine emotional attachments to artificial personalities designed specifically for companionship and emotional responsiveness. In some cases, users reported feeling more emotionally understood by AI systems than by other humans. And honestly, this is where the story stops feeling like business history and starts feeling much larger. Because the internet didn't simply digitize dating. It transformed the environment where emotional life itself increasingly happens. Previous generations mostly experienced relationships through repeated physical interaction, geography, overlapping communities, family structures, and slower emotional development over time. Modern relationships increasingly begin inside systems optimized through algorithms, notifications, engagement loops, recommendation engines, ranking systems, and subscription economics. Human intimacy itself became partially mediated by platforms, and younger generations grew up treating that environment as normal. Today, many adults experience romance through the same smartphone ecosystems already shaping attention spans, identity, self-worth, entertainment, friendships, and social comparison. The boundaries between social media, dating, validation, and entertainment became blurry. Swiping itself became culturally normal within barely a decade. And maybe the strangest part is how quickly human behavior adapted. 20 years ago, meeting partners online still sounded socially unusual. Today, in many countries, online dating became one of the most common ways couples meet. Entire relationships begin through recommendation systems created by engineers, behavioral scientists, machine learning teams, and monetization departments operating quietly behind phone screens. And somewhere along the way, loneliness stopped being just an emotion. It became engagement data. It became recurring revenue. It became one of the most valuable emotional resources in the modern internet economy.
Thank you so much for listening to this audiobook. I truly hope these words inspired you, motivated you, and gave you something valuable to take with you into everyday life. If you enjoyed this recording, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and explore my other inspiring audiobooks created to support your growth, mindset, and motivation. Your support means a lot and helps me create more content for listeners like you. See you in the next audiobook.